I'm Mason, and I still remember the night my life quietly shifted. Not in a way that exploded into chaos or drama, but in a way that settled like a shadow you only notice when the light fades. That evening started like so many others, with laughter that felt effortless, and a kind of warmth you think will never leave you. I had Ella by my side, and in my heart, I believed that was enough. I thought love was the only thing that mattered. Ella had a smile that made the world seem softer, brighter, as if even the small, ordinary corners of life could glow when she was around. She didn't come from money. Far from it. Her life had been careful, quiet, the kind of life that made you appreciate small joys. I had my own struggles, not wealthy by any measure, but honest work, simple pleasures, a life built on effort rather than privilege. And I thought maybe that was enough to keep her close, to build something real together. My father, Carter, was, well, he was the opposite of everything I was. Billionaire, commanding presence, careful eyes that seemed to weigh every word, every gesture. To me, he was the kind of man who carried the world on his shoulders, and everyone else was either helping him carry it or standing in the way. I had grown up trying to meet his quiet standards, knowing that love alone might never be enough for him to approve of anything. When he first met Ella, I could see it immediately. His gaze wasn't just curious, it was measured, not cold, not cruel, but calculating in a way that made me tense without even knowing why. "Bring her to dinner," he said one evening, almost casually. "I want to meet your fiancée." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. Though my stomach twisted in knots, I couldn't explain. I remember the day clearly. The air was crisp, the city lights outside, casting a soft glow through the windows. Ella looked stunning, as always, but not in a flashy way. She had this natural elegance, something that didn't demand attention but quietly held it. She laughed easily when I tried to lighten the mood, but I could feel her nerves just beneath the surface, as if she sensed something she couldn't name. My father greeted her with that perfect smile, the one that made it impossible to know what he was really thinking. "Ella, it's a pleasure," he said, and she returned the greeting politely, her tone warm but careful. From the start, I could sense an invisible line being drawn between them and unspoken test she didn't know she was walking into. Dinner began casually, but there was a rhythm to it that felt like more than conversation. My father asked questions, not rude, not probing in an obvious way, but questions that could unravel a person if they weren't honest. I watched Ella answer with charm, her eyes occasionally flicking toward me, seeking reassurance. I wanted to tell her everything would be fine, but I couldn't. I didn't know what was fine anymore. I've always believed that love could bridge any gap. Money, power, influence, they were just details, small things compared to the pulse of a real connection. But that night, as I watched the subtle exchanges between Ella and my father, I began to understand that the world sometimes measures heart in ways I wasn't prepared for, and that, perhaps, love alone wasn't always enough. The evening wore on slowly. The food, the soft clinking of glasses, the quiet laughter, all of it seemed ordinary. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all moving through something larger than ourselves. My father said little, but everything he said carried weight. I saw moments where Ella's smiles faltered, where her polite words seemed rehearsed. I felt a quiet panic in my chest, though I tried to hide it behind calm nods and gentle reassurances. By the time the dessert arrived, I realized I was holding my breath without knowing it. I could see, in small flickers of expression, that something had shifted. The warmth I had felt earlier, the careless certainty of our love, was beginning to tremble. And in that trembling, I sensed the first quiet sting of betrayal, though I didn't yet understand its shape. Even now, when I think back, I remember the silence between courses more vividly than the words themselves. A glance here, a slight hesitation there, a touch of tension under the surface. That dinner wasn't just a meal, it was a test, one that neither Ella nor I fully understood at the time. And it was a test that would leave echoes in our lives, shaping every choice I would make afterward in ways I couldn't yet imagine. I wanted to believe in her completely. I wanted to trust that the warmth I felt for her, the life we dreamed of building, would be enough to see us through any challenge. But sometimes, even the truest hearts must face shadows they didn't know existed. That night was our first brush with one of those shadows. And so, I sat there, silently watching, feeling the invisible weight of my father's gaze on us both, wondering if love would be enough to protect what I held most dear, or if it would quietly slip away, leaving only regret in its place. After that dinner, things didn't immediately fall apart. Life went on in its usual rhythm work, errands, quiet evenings, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. Every time I looked at Ela, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. At first I told myself it was just nerves, or maybe fatigue. But deep down, a quiet worry grew, like a seed taking root without me noticing. Ela began to speak differently, not harshly, not abruptly, but in ways that made me pause. Her words felt lighter, more careful, as if she was measuring every sentence before letting it reach me. I tried to brush it off, tried to remind myself that love wasn't built on constant certainty. But each smile that seemed a little forced, each laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes, left a small crack in my heart. I remember one afternoon clearly. We were walking through the park, the air warm and soft, the sunlight painting the trees gold. I reached for her hand, expecting her usual squeeze, the small gesture that always made me feel at home. She gave me a smile, but her fingers barely touched mine. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I only held her gaze a little longer, hoping she would see the worry behind my own smile. She looked away, her eyes tracing the path ahead, and I felt a small, quiet ache I couldn't name. Then there were the conversations about my father. Ela would sometimes ask questions, casual ones, about his business, his wealth, the way he lived. I could sense her curiosity was different than before. Less about me, more about the world he came from. I didn't want to think badly of her. I wanted to trust her completely. But the questions lingered in my mind, echoing long after they were asked. She must like his world, I whispered to myself one evening when she had gone home. I didn't even know if it was true, but the thought refused to leave. Every night, I found myself replaying that dinner over and over, her polite laughter, her careful smiles, the way my father's eyes seemed to watch her like a judge observing a trial. And in that silence, I began to wonder if love alone could ever survive in a world so measured, so calculated. Work became my refuge, though it offered little comfort. I would tell myself, Mason, she loves you. She's with you because she chooses to be. But even as I repeated those words, my heart was learning caution. Small moments began to matter more: the way she answered texts, the way she spoke about family, the subtle gestures that revealed her true thoughts without words. And with every small sign of hesitation, my hope trembled. One evening, I tried to bring it up gently, testing the waters. We were at dinner, our favorite little restaurant tucked in a quiet corner of the city. Candles flickered on the table, casting soft shadows, and the air smelled faintly of roasted bread and fresh herbs. I reached across, my hand hovering over hers. Ela, is everything okay? I asked softly, not wanting to push, only hoping she would share what was on her mind. She paused, fingers brushing against mine this time, but her eyes didn't meet mine fully. I'm fine, Mason, she said, voice light but distant. Really, everything's fine. And yet, I knew it wasn't. I could feel it in the way her smile didn't reach her eyes, in the way her words hung in the air like smoke, soft and drifting, never settling. I wanted to believe her, wanted to reach out and pull her close, but a quiet voice in my head whispered that something was changing. Something I couldn't yet name, but would feel deeply before long. Days turned into weeks, and the subtle tension grew. She spent more time talking about appearances, about the people she met at events, about the elegance and polish of wealth. I tried to be patient, to remind myself that curiosity isn't betrayal, that admiration for success doesn't mean a heart is untrue. But the more I watched, the more I felt the invisible divide between us stretching, pulling at the foundation I had thought unshakable. And then came the small incidents. Her laughter at jokes I didn't understand. The fleeting moments when she seemed more enchanted by his world than ours. I began to notice how easily she adapted to conversations with people who had money, how naturally she blended into rooms I had never been a part of. It wasn't arrogance. It was ease. And in her ease, I found my own insecurity gnawing quietly at the edges of my love. I tried to talk to her about it once, late at night, the city quiet outside our window. Ela, do you feel different around him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated. Different, she repeated, soft, almost puzzled. Yes, around my father, do you? I don't know. Feel like you're being tested or judged. I didn't want to accuse her, only to understand. I don't know? Feel like you're being tested or judged. I didn't want to accuse her, only to understand. She looked away, tracing patterns on the table with her finger. Mason? I don't know, maybe. I guess I just want him to like me? Those words landed like stones in my chest. Not because she wanted approval, that was natural, but because I realized how fragile love could feel when it brushed against the world of wealth, of influence, of silent measurement. And in that moment, I understood the challenge we were facing. It wasn't just about us. It was about everything that had ever defined our lives. The invisible lines drawn between worlds I hadn't imagined could exist in our love story. The weeks that followed were quiet but heavy. I watched, I listened, I felt every nuance, every gesture, every hesitation. Ella remained sweet, caring, loving in her own ways, but the faint, undeniable distance persisted, a shadow I couldn't chase away. And slowly, I began to see the shape of what might be becoming the truth behind my father's quiet test. The challenge I hadn't known we were facing, and the heartbreak that waited patiently for its moment to arrive. It happened one evening that I can never forget, though I wish I could. My father, Carter, asked me to meet him in his study. The room was lined with books, the soft glow of a desk lamp casting long shadows across the polished wood. He didn't speak at first, just motioned for me to sit, his eyes steady and unreadable. "Mason," he said finally, his voice calm, measured. "How's Ella?" I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's good, Dad. We're fine." He nodded slowly, leaning back in his chair. "You know why I invited her to dinner?" I hesitated, unsure if he meant it as a question or a statement. "To meet me?" I ventured. He smiled faintly, a small curve of lips that didn't reach his eyes. "To meet you, and to meet her?" His gaze was steady. "I wanted to see her heart, Mason, to know what kind of love she truly has for you, and I think I've learned more than I expected." The words hit me quietly, like the first drops of rain before a storm. My father had been testing her, measured her, observed her, and I had been blind to it. My mind raced back to that dinner, to every question, every pause, every glance between them. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that the warmth I had felt in my relationship wasn't enough on its own to bridge the space that her heart might be crossing. A few days later, the truth began to reveal itself. I caught subtle signs that had gone unnoticed before Ella's hesitations. Her excitement when talking about opportunities tied to wealth. Her casual admiration for the world my father inhabited. It wasn't overt, it wasn't dramatic, but it was there. And with every quiet gesture, my heart ached a little more. I remember the evening she called me, her voice unusually bright. "Mason, I got invited to that gala. Dad thought it would be good for me to see a different side of things," she said, almost too cheerfully. I hesitated. "Ella, are you going to go?" "Yes," she said without pause. "It's an opportunity, Mason. It's just networking, meeting people." I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to trust her. But a quiet dread had taken root. "Okay," I said softly. "Just be careful, all right?" Her laugh was light, but distant. "I will, don't worry." And I did worry, because I began to notice the little things, the way she admired expensive things, the way she sometimes spoke in terms I didn't fully understand, the way her attention shifted ever so slightly toward wealth and influence. My heart didn't scream in anger or betrayal, but it throbbed with quiet alarm. A gentle warning that love alone might not survive this test. It all came to a head one afternoon when my father invited both of us to lunch. I had hoped it would be casual, just a conversation, but the air felt heavier than before. He spoke with ease, observing Ella with subtle glances, and she responded in kind, polite, composed. And yet, beneath the surface, I could feel the undercurrent and invisible measuring tape, stretching between her heart and mine, weighing each choice she made. "Ella," my father said, his voice gentle, almost teasing, "do you love Mason for who he is, or for what surrounds him?" I froze, my hands tightening slightly on the table. Ella's eyes flickered, just for a moment, before she forced a smile. I love Mason," she said softly. But something in her tone, the hesitation, the faint tremor, made my chest sink. I knew then that my father's test was not about wealthy, was about honesty, about the depth of her heart. And the fear that had been quietly growing in me began to take shape. Had she truly been in love with me, or had she been enchanted by a world she didn't belong to? a world I could never provide. In the days that followed, I tried to hold on to hope, but reality crept in gently, persistently. Subtle truths, small betrayals, unspoken preferences, they all emerged quietly, like shadows stretching across a sunlit room. And in that stretching, I began to understand the fragile nature of trust, the delicate balance between love and desire, and the painful clarity that sometimes the heart reveals itself too late. One evening, as I watched her preparing for another event, I asked quietly, almost to myself, "Ella, what do you really want?" She looked up, startled, her expression unreadable. I don't know, Mason. I want to live, to experience life. Isn't that what we all want?" Her words felt like glass against my chest. They weren't unkind, not cruel, but they were honest in a way that cut deeper than any accusation could. She wanted life, yes, but maybe not the life we had imagined together, and in that moment, the turning point crystallized in my mind. The love I had believed in so wholly was being tested, not by me, not by circumstances, but by truth, by the quiet unveiling of her heart, and the subtle, unyielding weight of choices. I realized that my father's test wasn't just for Ela, it was for me, too. It was a lesson in observation, patience, and the sometimes painful clarity that the people we love most may not always love us in return the way we hope. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I only watched and listened and felt the gentle ache of reality settling over my heart. And as the days stretched on, the evidence became impossible to ignore. Subtle as it had been at first, it now formed a quiet, undeniable truth. My love alone would not be enough to hold her. In the weeks that followed, I began to understand something I hadn't fully grasped before. Love is not always enough. Not because it's weak, not because it fails, but because sometimes the world asks more than the heart can give. Ella was kind, charming, and warm, but the truth of her heart had quietly shifted in ways I couldn't control or change. I spent hours alone walking through the city streets at night, letting the soft hum of streetlights and distant traffic settle into my mind. I replayed every moment, every glance, every word, trying to make sense of it all. I realized that anger wouldn't help me, nor would pleading or resentment. What I needed was quiet understanding, a gentle acceptance that people reveal themselves in their own time, and sometimes their choices are beyond our reach. I saw my father in a new light during those days. Carter had never been cruel. He had only observed, tested, and revealed. His intentions were not to wound, but to illuminate. I think he knew something I hadn't wanted to admit, that love, while powerful, sometimes needed truth to survive. And the lesson he offered was not for Ella, but for me, for my heart, my patience, my capacity to see clearly without illusions. Ella and I continued to spend time together, though it felt different. I noticed the subtle pull of her desires, her admiration for elegance and ease, and I understood it was not malice, only who she was. I stopped trying to change her, stopped trying to force a love that was quietly fraying. Instead, I listened, I observed, and I allowed the space between us to speak volumes. There were moments of beauty still. Her laughter, still soft and warm at times, reminded me of the early days. Her hand, when it brushed against mine in fleeting touches, reminded me that connection is never entirely lost. But I no longer clung to illusions. I let reality settle over my heart, like a calm rain washing away the need for certainty. One evening, my father invited me again to his study. I expected questions, perhaps judgments, but instead he simply offered a quiet nod. "You understand now, Mason?" he said softly. "Love is not always enough, but clarity is. You've seen the truth without letting it destroy you." I nodded, feeling a gentle weight lift from my chest. It was not triumph, nor victory over Ella, nor even over circumstance. It was quiet wisdom, a subtle power that comes from observing, accepting, and choosing peace instead of anger. I realized then that my love for Ela had not been wasted. It had taught me patience, empathy, and the painful beauty of seeing someone's heart as it truly is. And though her path would diverge from mine, I carried no bitterness, only understanding and a calm knowledge that life's lessons are often delivered gently, if we are willing to receive them. In the months that followed, I focused on myself, on the small joys I had once overlooked: the quiet mornings with coffee, the soft music drifting through the apartment, the way light falls across a familiar street. I allowed grief to settle and then gently recede, making space for hope again. Not hope for a future with Ella, but hope for a life lived fully, honestly, and without illusions. Sometimes I would see her from a distance at events or gatherings where our worlds briefly brushed. She would smile, I would nod, and a quiet warmth would pass between us. No words were needed, no explanations. The truth had been revealed, acknowledged, and released. And in that release, I found a peace I had never known in the desperate clinging of early love. I also began to notice the subtle ways my father had prepared me, not with money, not with influence, but with insight. Carter had taught me to see clearly, to understand that heart and truth matter more than appearances, more than charm, more than wealth. And in that understanding, I found a quiet kind of revenge, not in hurting anyone, but in rising above confusion, in choosing calm over chaos, wisdom over pain. Love, I realized, is not ownership. It is understanding, patience, and acceptance. And sometimes, letting go is the most profound expression of love one can offer not to another. By the time the seasons changed, I felt lighter. The ache of loss had softened into a gentle reflection, the kind that makes you more compassionate, more aware, and quietly wiser. I could speak her name without the sting of longing, remembering both the warmth and the heartbreak. And in that balance, I found a truth that had eluded me before. Life is not about keeping what you want, but understanding what truly matters. And sometimes, what truly matters is not wealth, not charm, not admiration, but the quiet honesty of a heart fully revealed. I'm Mason, and now, when I look back, I see everything with a quiet clarity I didn't have before. The dinners, the tests, the subtle hesitations, they were all part of a lesson I had to learn for myself. Not about wealth, not about Elah, not even entirely about my father, but about the fragile, tender nature of love and truth. I think often about Elah. I don't blame her, nor do I dwell on what could have been. She followed her heart in the way she knew how, just as I followed mine. And sometimes, love is not about holding someone close. It's about understanding who they are and letting them go, even when it hurts. My father, Carter, taught me more than I realized at the time. He never pushed me, never forced me to see things in a certain way. He simply showed me the world as it is, and left it to me to understand what matters most. And now, I do. The quiet truth is that love, honesty, and patience are far more valuable than any fortune. They are the measure of a person, the weight of a life well lived, and the compass for every choice we make. I've learned to find joy in simplicity, in the laughter of friends, the soft warmth of sunlight on my face, the calm rhythm of a life lived with care. I've learned to listen more deeply, to watch more attentively, and to love without expectation. And in that, there is a quiet strength that no wealth, no charm, no influence could ever match. Sometimes I catch myself smiling at a memory, a small joke, a fleeting gesture, a glance across a crowded room, and I feel no bitterness, only understanding, only gratitude for the lessons, for the love, for the heartache that shaped me into someone stronger, someone wiser. And so I tell you this, quietly, softly, as if speaking to the night itself. Life has a way of teaching us the truth, not with thunder, but with whispers. And when those truths arrive, we can meet them with anger, or with calm, with resentment, or with understanding. I choose calm. I choose understanding. I choose to see hearts clearly, even when they hurt, and I choose to carry love gently, without clinging, without illusions. In the end, wealth can't measure the worth of love. It cannot reveal the depth of honesty, the resilience of patience, or the quiet strength that comes from seeing the heart as it truly is. The richest life is not one of possessions, but of clarity, compassion, and the courage to let go when it is needed most. And that, I have learned, is more valuable than anything else in the world.